themed funds have become increasingly prevalent with investors abroad. They are funds which are structured in line with investors' subjective view. To discuss funds with an environmentally friendly mandate, we're joined in studio by Carla Letchman, Technical Research Analyst at the Financial Planning Institute. Thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thank you for having me.
We were pushing Arno Lorenz there on thinking out of the box and looking at diversification, different asset classes, and obviously now we're chatting to you about really thinking out of the box and how seriously we've got to take green issues, water issues, agricultural issues. Perhaps let's just start with King 3 and what impact this is having on reporting overall.
King 3, there's been a greater significance shown towards environmental investments, social investments and economics, but with a greater focus on environment. I attended a presentation with Mervyn King, and that was the one thing he'd punted. He'd seen there being a move towards socially responsible investments as well as greater corporate governance. But in terms of the environment, nothing seems to be the companies don't seem to be doing much, especially as well as in the investment space, because you can sort of dictate, what companies do in terms of what consumers want. And if an investor wants something that's environmentally responsible, then asset managers are bound to follow that through.
Let me put this question to you. Do you think that South African investors are mature enough to invest in the environment?
That's a good question. At this stage, it just seems to be it's money that matters, really.
What do you think, if I put that question to you? Are you mature enough to invest in the environment?
Absolutely. I mean, we'll probably get through it, but there's a number of ways we can do it. But one of the interesting things is, through a number of global surveys that have taken place over the last 10 years, it's actually what investors want. And so if that's what they want, if they want to, as you mentioned, it's subjective views. If we want to know where our money, not only the return of our money, but where it's going and what good it's doing, or what effect it's having, or what difference it's making, then there needs to be a market that
can create those products for you as well.
That demand. And that's one of the interesting things. Previously, people who wanted to invest in environmental or social impact agendas thought that you'd have to go the charity route, but there is a way that you can do it, perhaps with sacrificing a little bit of return, and also ease your conscience or invest according to your morals or your code or whatever it is.
What uptake are we seeing at the moment in the South African environment?
There is no statistics available to show the exact uptake, but in terms of you saying that you just sort of have to forego returns, there wasn't an asset manager, very high-profile asset manager, who had a socially responsible investment fund, and that was a best-performing fund. So you wouldn't necessarily have to forego in returns. It's actually it's a wiser thing to do in terms of the risk in an investment. I just think it's wise from a business perspective to ask all the questions that you can ask, to look into a company to see longevity-wise, would the investment sustain? Exactly. Would it be sustainable in the future? You could be invested in a company where the main thrust of the business is something that is exhaustive. It won't be there in a few years to come, and all of your money is there. It creates a real issue because it reduces the sustainability, the longevity of the investment.
I think, to put it in context, 30, 40 years ago, Milton Friedman came with a major investment thesis saying that the predominant responsibility of company and corporate management was to enhance shareholder value through profits. And that has been the dogma that has been pervasive through the corporate world for the last 30, 40 years. And I think the financial crisis has changed things, but also people, through their demands and what they want to achieve with their money, have also challenged that. And then what we saw was actually last year, Michael Porter, who's a renowned Harvard Business School professor, came out with a new thesis saying that that's not necessarily true. We don't always have to chase profits. We can also, managers should actually look at their value chain and look at their supply chain and look at ways that they can make a difference, and it's actually good for business as well.
Yeah, that goes towards stakeholder interest. You're right, previously it was just shareholder interest, but now there's a broader view of stakeholder interest. It's the context in which a company operates. You need to look at the wider context and the actual environment, because ultimately it affects the business. if you look at strikes in South Africa and are employees happy, it has an effect on the ultimate shareholder interest. You need to be
But
cognizant
sometimes
of
employees are unreasonable, and they're going to be they're going to be happy unhappy no matter what. So,
but it's to at least preempt the outcome for the shareholders.
all right, now let's move on to two very interesting themes here. The one is agriculture, and I've recently conducted a number of debates about growth and opportunities on the African continent, and one of those opportunities comes over and over again, and that is in agriculture in light of food scarcity, which we ultimately are going to face globally. Are you seeing a lot of money moving into the agriculture space?
Globally, yes. There does seem to be a trend because ultimately it's a resource that's needed. Food is a necessity. Will we have sufficient food in the future? Not at the rate agriculture is happening at the moment. Is it sustainable? Study shows that it's not sustainable, and that there needs to be a move to creating enhanced agriculture. There's going to be much more of a population to feed, and globally there does seem to be a trend for investors investing in agricultural products. South African wise, I'm not so sure.
Well, that was my next question, specifically for South African investors, but African investors as well. How do we get access to these kind of products?
That is a good question.
It's very difficult,
to
isn't it? That's
approach
the
the asset managers, I guess, and to see if they have funds. Are they doing their research to see, the portfolios of companies, and to look at these companies and to see, do they have a environmentally sustainable mandate? I think it really is for the asset managers to be asking this of.
What about agriculture? Surely there are some stocks that are specifically in the agriculture space that, if we're talking about a theme here being agriculture, that you may take a bet on.
Yeah, absolutely. We deal with a lot of private clients who come with questions like this and how they want to get exposure to niche ideas that they have. And so what often we'll do is put together a basket of shares and create a portfolio for them. And some of the listed stocks on the JSE would be things like Tongaat, Zeda. If you'd like to go, you can to get agricultural exposure. You can go into the producers and retailers. However, most of them want to be in the actual the farmers themselves. And Tongaat and Zeda would actually provide very good opportunities. Alovo is another one.
And another theme, just before we go, because we are running out of time, is water.
Yeah.
And it's suddenly picked up on the radar screen now, as electricity was a concern a while back, and then we experienced the electricity shortages. Certainly now everybody is saying water sustainability is our next challenge going forward. Are we seeing investors taking this theme seriously? Not in South Africa yet, but globally, is that the answer?
Yes. And in South Africa, this was something that was taken up a while back by, I don't know where the money came from and who the investors were, but it was foresight. We knew that Johannesburg wouldn't have sufficient water to sustain the population, and thus was the Lesotho Highlands Water Project created. So it's just foresight, and the returns might not be now, but longevity, and in the long term, the returns will be there because you're catering for a demand that's a necessity. So internationally, yes, investment in water resources has increased.